Hello everyone, welcome again. Today I would like to explore with you a model called the ABC model, which is very simple model, and if we learn it we would be able to be our own therapist. It's a very good way of identifying our own emotions and where is our emotions stemming or coming from. Right, let's dive into it. So what A stands for? A stands for the activating events. And what I mean by that is the trigger, a situation that triggers us. And then we have B in the middle, which is the core of this model, the core of everything of our emotion and where is this emotion coming from. But let's leave that till the end. Then we have C. C is the consequences. Right. B is the belief. All right. So the belief that we hold about the situation. Okay, let's go to A. So the activating event or the situation that triggers us, it can be something from the present moment, something we are experiencing now, or it can be from the past. We reflect on the past and triggers us and makes us feel something, which is we're going to explain more in the consequences, or something about the future that triggers us as well. It can be real, happening to us now in the present moment, or imaginary, which we will notice imaginary goes hand in hand with the future. However, imaginary can be about all these things here. So, but this is the possibility of having a situation that we experience in these different circumstances here. It can be internal or external. External, that we hear in news, unpleasant news, and sometimes they can be a good news. For example, job interview. So you are looking for a job and you receive an email saying that you've been shortlisted for a job interview and this is the date and this is the time. Decline or accept. So this will definitely trigger something in us. It would definitely trigger a feeling, excitement, as well as we might feel a bit fearful, anxious or nervous. The reason that sometimes we feel anxious or anxiety because we want this job so much and we are so scared of doing something wrong or saying something wrong and we ruin this opportunity. And this is very normal human being thing. We have in the consequences, we have our thoughts, our assumptions, our personal assumptions about the situation here. And then we have a behavior as a consequences because we are so nervous that we feel about the situation. And then we have an action tendencies, and I will explain more about that, i.e. desire to feel doing something. And this doesn't mean that we're going to do this desire or doing this actually doing it. It's just a desire to really feel doing it. Then we have the symptoms or physical symptoms. And these physical symptoms, they can be racing, just to give you an example, heartbeat, plus blushing. We've all experienced those consequences because of the situation that we've experienced due to this event happening here. So where are these consequences coming from? Where is this feeling, a thought, a behavior, action tendencies coming from? They all coming from the belief. What's this belief all about? So first we need to know that belief divided into two. We have the unhealthy, and then we have the counterpart to it, the healthy, and this is our goal, of course. But this is how we, when we present our issue here, we have a situation that triggers our feelings. And of course, we all have feelings and thoughts about any kind of situation that we experience in our life. But we don't want our feelings or thoughts trigger something in us that it's so unhealthy, affects our well-being or health. I know some people, when they experience anxiety, they can experience diarrhea or constipation, which is really, really unfortunate. And that's why this stems from the unhealthy belief, or sometimes we call it the irrational or rational thinking or rational belief. So the reason of me explaining this ABC model, because we don't want to get to this symptoms. We don't want to allow those thoughts and feelings to affect our health and well-being as well, psychological well-being. Right. So now we know the consequences come from the unhealthy or irrational belief. There is something very interesting about, and you might wonder, what is the difference? Of course, the difference is this here is rigid and realistic, illogical, and unhelpful. It's not flexible as well, because this goes hand in hand with rigidity. And the healthy counterpart of the belief is flexible, logical, realistic, and helpful. So an example of that, the first example, demands. Did I spell demands correct? Yes. And the example of demands is I must, I should, they should. It's not just about us as well, about others as well. I have to. A very, very rigid. Right, and the second one is awfulizing. And I can give you an example of that is end of the world. This is how our mind sometimes interpret things as if the end. Sometimes we can interpret it as catastrophic. And we come back to this one. Then the third one, we have low frustration tolerance. And again, an example of that, I cannot tolerate it, or stand it, or cope. That's what we believe. This is our rigid belief or unrealistic belief, because in reality we can tolerate and cope and stand everything in life. It's just that we believe that we cannot do it. Then the fourth one is self, others, and world damning. An example is I am. The interesting thing about the irrational or unhealthy beliefs that you will notice some people, they might have all four of them, or they might have just demands and self or others, the appreciation, or more likely just about the self, that they demand things in a very strong way, and if they don't achieve that with their must, should, and have, then it means something about them. Or you will notice someone will have, they would demand something in a very, very strong way. I must have this job. I must not be negatively judged by others. I should do very well at this interview. If not, it means the end of the world. And I cannot stand it not getting this job. And it means something about me. I am worthless. I'm stupid. I am, and so on. When I talked about our goal for the healthy belief, there is a way to transform this into something healthy. You might think that some people, they cannot carry on in life without having this must and should and have. But it's very, very rigid. It's really rigid, because in life, anything can happen. And we know that because anything can happen, we have to have a flexibility and something logical and something meets the reality of our life, something helpful to make us carry on in life. We can't just stick to must and should and have all the time. It's not really realistic. I don't think this is something realistic. What if something goes wrong? What if you are very well prepared and they ask you something that you don't feel that this is quite realistic to ask you, or it doesn't meet the times, in so many cases it might not meet the job description that you were prepared for, or sometimes they just evaluate you based on very specific qualities they're looking for. It doesn't mean anything about yourself. It doesn't mean that you're worthless or you didn't prepare. So therefore we have to look at the quality of our thoughts that reflects the belief that we have at the back of our mind. So instead of having musts, have and shoulds in a very rigid and realistic way, it's better if we have a preference. An example of preference is I say I prefer to answer all questions correctly or impress the interviewers. However, I accept I might not, or I accept I might not get this job, which is very possible. Right, so now we know that we have an alternative, a healthy alternative that will keep us going, and it's, I believe that the healthy belief is like a backup plan to us. So when we go through a situation here, the consequences here, they can be in a healthy way. We don't get to a point where we experience symptoms that will make us less, it won't be able to function in a way or another in life, or even go to an interview, or sometimes the action tendency that we have, we might email the company and say, oh, I would like to decline. This is the desire that we might have in that we feel like doing because we are so anxious about the whole situation. Right, going back to the healthy. So now we have the demands, and the healthy alternative is preference. I prefer to do well at my job interview. However, I accept I might not. I accept I might not get this job from first time. Maybe I don't fit in with the team. Maybe for other reasons. I don't know. It's just good to have the acceptance at the back of your mind, to have that preference. And then we have number 2 is, instead of awfulizing in a catastrophic way, it's the end of the world if you don't get the job, or if you are negatively judged for saying something wrong. We have the anti-awfulizing, which means I can say it was bad, but not the end. Why is it important to acknowledge that it was bad? Let's say that we went for this job interview and it went really, really bad. Acknowledging that is good than pushing it away. And we don't want to acknowledge it. It was bad, then acknowledge it. Just say it was bad, but you know what? It's not really the end of the world, because the reality is that it wasn't really the end of the world. They're going to forget about it. You're going to forget about it. You're going to learn something of it, and you're going to do maybe well in the second, third, fourth. It doesn't matter. The most important thing that you've learned something out of it. Right. Then the third one is this job interview. It will not mean anything about you. Just one situation in life. It will not rate you as being worthless or stupid or etc. Things just happen. Sometimes we don't get things from the first time or second time. It's good to be prepared and everything, but maybe we need to look at other things in life. The most important thing is to not link it to something strongly about us, to not rate ourselves in a very negative way. That's the most important thing. And to tolerate it. And that's the third one. Here we have a low frustration tolerance, but here we're going to increase it. That we feel that we cannot stand or tolerate the fact that we didn't get the job. However, we can say, you know what, it was difficult, but I can tolerate it. Okay? I think it's very important to empower ourselves, to say that I've did my best, I did my best in this job interview, and it was difficult interview, it wasn't easy, and I can cope and I can tolerate it that I didn't get it, and I was able to sit there and answer their questions as much as possible. And this is very important, to learn to empower ourselves and to look at the qualities that we have, even though that we did not get or achieve what we wanted. Right, and the fourth one is the unconditional self-acceptance. It can be for the interview, right, or we don't get the job right. And if this happens, we could say to ourselves that I don't like the fact that I went, there's a bit of scribbles here, through this experience. However, you learn to say to yourself that I accept myself unconditionally. I am a fallible human being, and I can't get things or achieve what I want all the time. It's good to be realistic. It's really important to be realistic. At some times in our life, we can't achieve everything. We can't get everything right. We can't let ourselves down just from one situation, one experience. It's good to empower ourselves. It's good to stick by ourselves. It's good to be honest and flexible and helpful and logical. Just because I didn't get this job interview, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. It doesn't mean that you cannot tolerate it. It doesn't mean that it means something about yourself. It happens all the time. Humans fail and succeed, and they won't be able to succeed without failing. So the reality of life is to acknowledge that sometimes we can't get things right, and that's fine. It doesn't mean that we are bad or we are. I hope this ABC model demonstrated how our emotions and thoughts are triggered because of a situation experienced here, which we experience these situations all the time. But the thing is, those here, the consequences or the emotion triggered in an unhealthy, negative way because of the belief that we hold about the situation. So the perception that we have about the situation will determine how we have feelings or thoughts about this situation. So if we learn to repeat over and over again, to have a preference, to acknowledge the badness of the situation, but it's not the end of the world, to empower ourselves and to acknowledge that we are fallible human beings and we can't get things right all the time, I think that's enough. That's very. This illustration you found quite helpful, and you can do it on your own on different situations that you might experience. So if you have a trigger or a situation, you can just do it the way that I've done it. If it's in the present or from the past or about the future, if it's an internal or external, then you identify your thoughts. If you feel nervous, what's your thoughts? What are you thinking? And the behavior, if you're eating too much, if you're drinking, smoking, or biting nails, etc. What's the action tendency? Something that you would like to do so much, but it doesn't mean that you're going to do it. It's just a desire that you want to do. And the symptoms, physical symptoms. And look at which one of these that you have. Do you have 4 of them? Do you have 1, 2, 3, or just 1 or 2, etc.? And you can transform them into a preference, the healthy counterparts here, and this will help you more. So remember the power of words you express to yourself or to your mind. It's good to have a preference. It's good to be realistic about things in life, because that's a helpful way always look at it in pragmatic way. Does it make sense to me that just because I want things and demand things in a very rigid way, it's going to follow and it's going to happen? Because in reality of our life, it might not happen. So it's good to accept, to show that acceptance of what has happened and what is happening and what could happen as well. And sometimes we might not like it. And this is where the low frustration coming from, that we cannot cope with this, with the discomfort that we're going through because we did not achieve things in the way that we demanded. And this means the end of the world, and this means that's something about us or the world. But as soon as we have the preference, things will follow nicely. We would be able to see things clearly. It's good to be realistic, to achieve our goal in a more realistic and helpful way. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.